Coming in at number 10, talking to fish. Look, almost everyone knows Aquaman as the guy who can talk to fish. It's the most common thing brought up when talking about the hero. But that statement is both a huge misunderstanding and only one small part of a much more interesting ability. Aquaman is not like the Deep from The Boys. As far as we know, fish and marine life are not at the level of intelligence that allows them to hold conversations. They can't tell you how their day is going or try and maintain relationships with us, and honestly, why would they want to? We kinda suck. Aquaman is not actually talking to fish. Instead, Aquaman uses telepathy. He can hear the voice of the sea and communicate with its many denizens living within it, along with those who spring from it through empathic communication. While he is more than capable of using this ability to force marine beings to do what he wants, Aquaman prefers to telepathically suggest aquatic life towards his goal or out of harm's way in order to maintain their respect. This is something he has been able to do since he was a child, but it doesn't just pertain to aquatic life. Although he can't force humans or other creatures to do his bidding in the same way he can with the denizens of the sea, through his telepathy he is more than capable of weakening, probing, dominating, and attacking non-aquatic minds as well. And he's even used these abilities to boost up the power of his own teammates. Number 9. Accessing the clear. Prior to the New 52 reboot, Aquaman possessed the ability to tap directly into a force known as the Clear. This primordial force is what binds all life in the sea and provides ocean-themed heroes with their superpowers. Thanks to his harnessing of the Clear, Aquaman's awesome natural telepathy that we just talked about was augmented to a larger degree, allowing him to communicate with and summon sea creatures from the other side of the planet and send out telepathic broadcasts across the ocean. It even allowed him to form a universal consciousness with all life in the sea, enabling him to send his mind out to see through the eyes of sea life. Something interesting about this force is that, well, technically, all life at some point originated from the ocean. So, Aquaman can also push his telepathic powers to reach out to the higher land creatures to find that element of their brains that was once an aquatic dwelling creature and manipulate it. Now, post New 52, this connection to the Clear has been altered slightly and is now known as a connection with the Life Force. The Life Force is one of the 7 forces of the universe, and for Aquaman, his connection to the Life Force is focused on marine life, and not just the marine life of Earth either. Through the Life Force, Arthur is connected to all living beings, which has enabled him to establish a supernatural link to any and all sentient entities throughout the entire cosmos. He can use this connection to determine a being's origin, as he was able to do when he determined that the Void Song came from an ocean planet after being in close contact with it. With the Life Force, a lot of his abilities are similar to the connection to the Clear, with a whole bunch more still unknown even to Aquaman, which leaves some pretty exciting potential for his character and what powers he could possess in the future. Number 8. Night Vision. Now, I don't know if you know, but the sea is deep, and a large majority of it is so far away from the surface that it's pretty much in a constant state of almost complete darkness. And even if it isn't, if it's nighttime or if we're looking through murky water, forget about it. You ain't seeing anything down there. It's estimated that the average human can see between 165 and 230 feet deep in moderately clear water. Well, for Aquaman, an Atlantean human hybrid, he once said that he could see clearly in depths as far down as 6,000 fathoms, aka 36,000 feet. That is insane. That includes seeing through the murkiest of waters. So, now, take that incredible supervision and put it on land where it's not inhibited by water, and Aquaman has incredible supervision, allowing him to see clearly in the dark and see things that other League members could never even hope to pick up on. Number 7. Summoning undead sea life. Some of our heroes' powers really only come to light or become useful in very specific situations, and some literally only appear in key events, never to be seen again. Now, an example of that kind of power for Aquaman came during the Brightest Day crossover event, which followed the awesome Blackest Night. In Blackest Night, Aquaman was one of a bunch of heroes and villains that were resurrected from the underworld to become members of the Black Lantern Corps. After their defeat, the remaining heroes and villains who returned to the land of the living had to now find find their purpose. Aquaman was returned with the purpose of both saving Aqualad and preventing a war between Atlantis and Zabel. Arthur found that since he was resurrected to serve as a member of the Black Lantern Corps, he was now able to summon undead sea life to come to his aid. And trust me when I say that it is much cooler than you might think. Unfortunately though, it didn't really stick around for a long time. Number 6. Magic. Now before you get all up in arms, no, Aquaman is not any kind of otherworldly powerful magic wielder. He's no Zatanna, Constantine, or Dr. Fate, but still, a lesser known inclusion to his surprisingly long list of abilities is that Aquaman has the underlying potential to cast and manipulate the forces of magic. Now it's worth noting that normally he needs an item of power to channel this power through, like, oh I don't know, a trident for example. But on a few occasions he's been able to use magic without his trident or any kind of channeling object for that matter. This magical ability is bestowed on him simply by being a member of Atlantean royalty, but also by being blessed by both Poseidon and the Lady of the Lake, the overseer of the metaphysical realm known as the Secret Sea. He has shown the magical capability to shoot lightning from his trident, manipulate the weather, create jets of water out of his hands, and he has even been able to dehydrate some enemies to the point of sending them to the afterlife, which is an absolutely terrifying way to go. But thanks to his magical affinity, Arthur Curry is also resistant and resilient to the forces of magic too, which is something he actually has over Superman. So take that, you haters. Number 5. Hydrokinesis. Alright, so we know Iceman can control ice. But there was a time when Emma Frost mentally controlled Bobby and she utilized his powers in ways that he had never even imagined. It turns out that since Iceman can control ice, which is just frozen water, then it actually makes total sense that he also has hydrokinesis, or the ability to manipulate water. And since he is a potential Omega level mutant, he can do it at a molecular level. We know that he can use surrounding moisture to augment himself, but when Emma was controlling him, she used his power to travel within large bodies of water very quickly by breaking down to his base levels in the water and then reforming at his destination. Iceman has demonstrated the ability to be transformed into nothing more than water or water vapor, yet remain conscious and retain the use of his powers. Essentially, wherever there is any moisture of any kind, Iceman is a threat. Number 4. Cryokinetic perception / cryo travel. Okay, so I'm going to wrap these two up into one, even though they aren't really technically fully the same, although they kind of are at the same time. For starters, after Bobby, whose powers were significantly amplified and who was kind of a little bonkers at the time, managed to freeze the earth in ice and snow, he gained the ability to spread his actual consciousness through the ice and through the snow to allow him to perceive literally all events occurring within it. He could monitor the entire earth through the ice and snow, and it made him practically a god. With his ability to transform organic matter, such as the human body, to organic ice and back again, it is possible for him to project his consciousness through moisture molecules and reform his body at the destination, like he did when Emma Frost controlled him, and he did indeed do this in this story as well, traveling through the ice and snow and appearing wherever he wanted. Number 3. Cellular replacement. We already talked about, a few times, Iceman's hydrokinesis and how he has literally turned himself into and traveled through the molecules of water. Well, Bobby also eventually discovered that he was able to use his control over moisture to draw ambient moisture into himself and thus use that moisture to replace his own body's cells. Quote, a body swap done one piece, one cell at a time. This upgrade to his already insane abilities allowed Bobby to avoid receiving a fatal dose of neurotoxin by letting the poisoned molecules of his body dissipate into vapor and then be replaced by untainted water molecules from his surroundings. Iceman can replace his own cells with new ones, healing and purging himself by remaking his own body. As long as there is moisture, Iceman cannot be stopped, it's just a fact. Number 2. Thermovision. With such a fine-tuned control over cold and temperature like what Iceman has, it would make sense that he would be able to maybe sense or feel heat. But it turns out he can literally see it. Because of the absence of heat around himself when his temperature is dropped, Bobby can literally see beings simply based on the heat signatures they give off. This happened most famously when the X-Men were facing against Onslaught. At the time, Onslaught managed to mess the X-Men's perception of things and became invisible. Luckily, the X-Men had Bobby. He scanned the entire room, and thanks to the heat that Onslaught's body was naturally giving off, Bobby saw Onslaught the minute he entered the room, using his ice blasts to attack him and break his psionic shielding, allowing the other X-Men to see him too. And finally, in at number 1, he can stop the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut is not just strong. The Juggernaut is fueled by magic, powered by a massively powerful extra-dimensional being called Sidorak. Through Sidorak, Juggernaut was granted the ability to gain unstoppable momentum with each step, to the point that not even the hammer of Thor can stop him in his tracks. Who cares about ancient magical Uru metal hammers though, when you have the power of ice? Iceman managed to completely stop the Juggernaut in his tracks during one of the X-Men's many encounters with Cain Marko. Now it is worth noting that Juggernaut was not in his top form at the time, but regardless, stopping the Juggernaut dead in his tracks using massive amounts of ice to immobilize him is incredibly impressive. But it wasn't the only way Bobby has stopped the guy, and this one, I have to warn you, is ridiculous even for a comic book. During another battle with the Juggernaut, Iceman got creative with his powers. Iceman used his powers to, and I quote, freeze the speed of light around him. Freeze the speed of light around Juggernaut. Iceman is so powerful, he temporarily rewrote the laws of physics themselves to achieve his victory. It's also worth noting that in this same fight, he created wings made out of ice that actually allowed him to fly, which I don't think is possible. Personally though, if it was me, and I'm just gonna put in my own little opinion here, I would just make like a loop of ice so the Juggernaut slips and goes around and around and around and around, gaining speed and momentum, and then I would give it like a little offshoot ramp and just send him careening into space, like unable to stop. He would just be gone. What are you gonna do? Nothing. You can't stop. I'm just saying.
In its 10, resistance to telepathy. Psychics in the Marvel Universe are undeniably real, with a significant number of mutants possessing psychic abilities, including members of the X-Men. Professor X, the X-Men founder, is a powerful psychic, and Jean Grey initially displayed telekinesis before unlocking her own psychic powers. Rachel Grey, Jean Grey's daughter from an alternate universe, is also a psychic and frequently joins the X-Men, but despite the prevalence of psychics, some heroes in the universe receive training to defend themselves against psychic attacks and probing, such as Wolverine, who was given psionic shields by Charles Xavier to enhance his resistance. While these defenses are not foolproof, they offer valuable protection, especially when there are so many damn psychics. Notably, even some villains have safeguards against psychics, like Magneto and Juggernaut, who has that helmet that prevents Professor X from accessing their thoughts. But in a bizarre turn of events, Red Skull consumed Professor X's brain, gaining psychic abilities himself. So there you go, Wolverine, you'll be able to fight against Red Skull a little bit more, I guess. Is that really a common problem for you? I don't think so. In at 9, lie detection. Logan, or Wolverine, whatever you want to call him, possesses a heightened sense of smell and hearing that surpasses that of an average human. His sense of smell is incredibly potent, which allows him to detect scents from a considerable distance, making it useful for tracking down enemies, but this acute sense of smell enables him to actually pick up on certain emotions as well, such as fear, which is emanating from individuals, pheromones, all that jazz. Okay? His hearing is also quite exceptional, allowing him to perceive sounds that are far away and even detect softer noises that are typically beyond the range of normal perception. So, combining these powers, Wolverine actually becomes basically a human lie detector. By focusing on a specific person, he can determine if they are telling the truth or not by relying on his sense of smell, detecting changes in their scent and sweating patterns if they lie, while using his hearing to actually concentrate on their heartbeat and detect any shifts in their tone of voice, which is pretty dope, and I wish I had that in my last relationship. In at 8, Berserker Rage. Here I am just dumping my trauma. Wolverine possesses a dangerous state known as Berserker Rage, which is triggered by an overwhelming anger that drives him to lash out uncontrollably. In this frenzied state, he becomes an unstoppable killing machine, slashing through enemies without hesitation. However, the downside is that Wolverine loses all sense of control and may even harm his allies, unable to recognize them in the midst of his rage, which I certainly relate to. This internal struggle has plagued Logan since childhood and often leads him to distance himself himself from others, fearing what he might do, but despite the risks, there are moments when the Berserker Rage proves necessary, particularly in his relentless battles against Sabretooth. The movie franchise also showcases this aspect of Wolverine, with a memorable scene in X2, the best X-Men movie, where he unleashes this fury, slashing through adversaries within the confines of the X-Mansion. But again, you all remember that scene, it's the best X-Men movie. Please flash sarcasm on the screen because they won't know I'm joking. In its 7th night vision, the combination of Wolverine's claws and super healing already gives him a formidable set of powers. Okay, the healing factor alone ensures that any wound is swiftly healed, including those caused by his claws, making him truly lethal. And alongside these regenerative capabilities that literally brought him back from a drop of blood, Logan possesses heightened senses like the super hearing, the smelling, and the ability to see in the dark. Although this power is often overlooked by some comic writers, it provides him with a distinct advantage in various situations. Wolverine has had an array of powers that has changed and evolved over the years, making him increasingly more powerful, but what initially began as a mutant with enhanced durability and claws developed into a character that is basically a, dare I say, Wolverine. Haha, get it? Yeah. He's constantly aware of his surroundings no matter what environment he's in because of this night vision, and his tendency to eliminate enemies before they actually pose like a genuine threat makes him exceedingly more formidable than normal. And this explains how he's able to do that, because you know, he can see in the dark. And it's 6 Swordsman. In the 1990s comic storyline Fatal Attraction, Magneto forcibly removes the adamantium from Wolverine's body, leaving him without his signature claws. In this adamantiumless period, Wolverine carried a katana given to him by the Yoshida clan for added protection. One notable use of this katana was when he ended up beheading Bloodscream. Yeah. Oh boy. Later on, Wolverine acquired the Muramasa Blade, a sword with mythical properties capable of neutralizing a mutant's healing abilities, which is the unique blade that became his weapon of choice in certain situations, allowing him to confront and defeat formidable adversaries such as Omega Red and Sabretooth. And as it was the only weapon capable of truly ending Wolverine, therefore also able to end Omega Red and Sabretooth. But yeah, he's skilled with a sword, which you wouldn't really expect because, you know, he has the claws, but also makes sense because the claws are just basically tiny swords.
Number 5. Overcoming mental blocks. This is most likely a case of writers just forgetting the focus of Jean's psionic powers in the earlier days, but it happened in continuity. So that also means we can kind of count their possible mistake as actually a major strength for Jean. And if another writer wanted to reflect back on this moment, they could easily use it to bolster Jean's power levels, even back in the day when she was notably written to be a lot weaker. Remember how I said that Professor X created mental blocks for Jean when it came to her telepathy, which he later removed when he felt she was ready to handle her own off-the-charts power levels? Well, apparently early on, Jean did still display some telepathic abilities, even somehow with those blocks supposedly in place. She read Professor X's mind in an issue of Captain America, sensing that something was wrong by reading his thoughts. She literally says, like, she read his mind, basically. If this is true and it's considered canon, it would mean that Jean temporarily pushed through Xavier's mental blocks to read his mind, which, gotta be honest, that's like on a whole other level of power, I think. So if we want to count it as canon, there you go. Number 4. Interstellar travel. When it comes to those with psionic abilities, we don't typically think of them as cosmic heroes who can fly through space and fight aliens, but guess what? Jean can. While bonded with the Phoenix Force, Jean has been shown to be capable of interstellar travel, propelling herself through space. The vacuum of space, she can just fly right through it and she feels fine, doesn't even need a spacesuit. She has also been shown to be able to fly and make it appear as though others are flying on Earth by using her telekinesis, but that one you probably already knew about. The interstellar travel though, that might have caught you unawares. Number 3. Communicating undetected. Another great power as a telepath that Jean manages to have is keeping her telepathic conversations secret, which, when there's a lot of other telepaths around you, is not easy. Basically, there are many other powerful telepaths around you who could be trying to pry and eavesdrop on you, and a lot of them are also powerful. But Jean has managed to keep more than a few mental conversations a secret, even from some of the other most powerful telepaths in the universe, including Null. Null, the god of symbiotes. While Null himself was in the middle of a telepathic conversation with Dylan, Jean actually managed to use her powers to slip into said conversation completely unnoticed, with Null not even aware that Jean was also talking to Dylan telepathically at the same time, and that Dylan wasn't really listening to him so much as he was listening to Jean. Honestly kinda rude, but also, yeah, Jean's trying to tell Dylan how to save the day, so fair enough. Number 2, control over nightmares. I don't know what's more frightening, the fact that Jean can basically manipulate people's dreams and nightmares through the villain Nightmare, or the threat she gave Nightmare after defeating him, where she basically said if she had to deal with him again, she was gonna destroy him at an atomic level. She's like, look, I don't like to end people's lives, but if you mess with me again, I will destroy you at an atomic level. Either way you slice it though, when it comes to nightmares that have been created by the god of nightmares himself, Nightmare, Jean is the one who would really call the shots between them when they're pitted against one another. I've seen them run into each other a few times, and it does not end well for Nightmare. Number 1, the Phoenix Force. This is less of a power and more of a really interesting fact about a power. So for those of you that heard me say that title and go, well obviously we know that, Amanda, yes, yeah I know. But I actually didn't know this fact myself initially, and I was surprised by it somewhat, so I figured I'd share it with you. We all know that Jean is one of the preferred hosts, if not I would say the preferred host for the Phoenix Force, but did you know that the all-powerful cosmic entity was actually holding Jean back? That's right. Jean has stated before that she actually became aware after the Phoenix Force left her that it was causing her to hold back her abilities and her power for fear of the Phoenix taking hold over her, because then she wouldn't have control. So while many like to say that Jean has only ever been extremely powerful when she's merged with the Phoenix, it turns out it's probably just the opposite. So yeah, Jean destroying like a whole world, apparently that's Jean holding back. Which honestly, to me, I gotta say, that all kind of makes sense. Saying Jean isn't actually powerful and that it's all the Phoenix has always felt like a cop-out to me, considering it's her own power and her own empathy that the Phoenix was seemingly attracted to in the first place. So you would think that would mean that she's at least on the same power level as the Phoenix, if not more powerful, and that's why it was like, yeah, I want you as the host, cause you got the power.
In at 10, acidic hands. Discovered by Kane Parker after the clones event, a deformity in his hands causes Kane to possess the ability to generate an endothermic energy that upon skin-to-skin contact inflicts severe burn marks on individuals. Yeah, this man can use his hands that stick to walls to also burn people. Usually he would leave his distinctive marks across a person's face, calling it the mark of Cain, although it is believed that he can do so on other parts of the body, which I mean it makes sense given that, you know, you can just grab on with a hand and then boom, you're burned. But interestingly enough, he also utilizes this way in like a non-harmful manner, using it to burn away his like beard hair, which just gives him a better trim, which is just kind of funny. I like the fact that he uses it to burn his hand into people's faces, but then also just gives himself a nice little trim. But while this ability was discovered by Kane, Peter soon after learns that he can do the same thing. And while he hasn't used this ability, he is still able to do it and just chooses not to because it's a horrible thing to do. He can also pull people's skin off using the stickiness of his hands, which I have asked before, like I've proposed that idea before because I think that he should have threatened to do that to Kingpin instead of filling his lungs with web, but oh well. In at 9, camouflage. Now this is one of the primary abilities used by Miles Morales' Spider-Man, however, you can actually see that in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man he has this ability as well. Not to the same extent, of course, he can't turn invisible, but there's a theory about how this presents itself. Firstly, the fact that Spider-Man talks to MJ, Aunt May, and Harry without them recognizing Peter's voice could be explained by this just being thanks to this camouflage ability. MJ only recognizes that Peter is Spider-Man after he wants to tell her, you know, after she kisses her fiance upside down. Like, he wants her to know, so of course the camouflage would be off then. And Harry only learns his identity after literally taking his mask off. So yeah, this would also explain why the guy on the train in Spider-Man 2 describes the almost 30-year-old Maguire as just a kid barely older than my son. Or in the comics and animated series, we see that Peter eventually mutates into a giant spider. Maybe staying human is this camouflage ability. His power keeps him looking human. To further support this, in the animated series, Peter starts losing his powers shortly before mutating into the spider creature. If one of his powers was keeping him human, then it would make total sense that he mutates after losing them. And Peter actually started losing his powers in Spider-Man 2, so maybe that's a storyline we could have seen later on. In at 8, stingers. The other represents a potent spider deity that's intricately connected to the web of life and destiny. While the true nature of its purpose remains enigmatic, the entity grants its chosen vessels heightened abilities and the potential for transformation into a spider-like humanoid monster in times of peril or intense anger. The Earth 616 Spider-Man was selected by the Great Weaver to serve as the receptacle for the power of the other when he assumed the mantle of Spider-Man. However, due to his subconscious resistance, Spider-Man suppressed and denied this spider aspect until a confrontation with the inheritor Morlun, who consumed the essence of totem avatars, prompting a resurgence of his connection to the other. At one point during the storyline, Peter Parker has created retractable stingers that are concealed beneath his wrists. And so yeah, with these stingers possessed a razor sharp edge that could be extended when needed, and then they also delivered a venom that induced temporary paralysis into his target, which is kind of dope. Kane Parker actually is currently the individual who uses this ability because of course it's Kane, but yeah, it's still pretty dope. And it's 7 clairvoyance. When you think about it, Spider Sense is kind of predicting the future. It doesn't give you visions or show you exactly what will happen like is typically associated with clairvoyance, but instead it's presented just like a really good gut instinct. Like that tingling sensation that accompanies the spider sense can vary in intensity, providing an indication of the threat level, but like a casual encounter with a potential adversary who isn't actively engaging with an individual may trigger a mild alert, which means that you should be cautious. But on the other hand, when you're facing like an imminent and life-threatening danger like a sniper, like the sensation is going to intensify significantly, even possibly becoming painful. And instinctively it compels you into action. And while the spider sense doesn't reveal the specific nature of the threat, it offers you guidance on the direction that you should move in order to evade it and things like that. Okay, this extraordinary ability warns you of various perils, okay, ranging from projectiles to like lasers and even contaminated food. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a form of clairvoyance. I can't do that. When I do it, it's called autism. And it's 6, equilibrium. While yes, having sticky limbs and appendages makes it easy and possible to stick to walls, that's not all that you need to actually be Spider-Man. Like sure, you can stand on a wall, but even with all the strength of your abs, you wouldn't be able to keep you like balanced and standing upright, alright? No one can do that, not even Chuck Norris. Like how else could you not lose your momentum or anything while swinging through New York, okay? He's swinging around buildings, through alleys, even through like the spaces between cabs and their backs, okay? There's no way that this guy could do all of that just inherently, okay? Like yeah, he's got the powers of a spider, but spiders don't swing around the city doing flips. His center of gravity is constantly fixing himself to keep himself balanced while chasing after red psychopathic space aliens and dudes in rhino costumes. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a power.
Number 5. What tires us only makes him stronger. Not only does Hyperion not need to breathe, which makes him a pretty scary foe to face, to be honest, if you had to, but he doesn't tire at all in the same way that we do. When humans exert themselves, and more specifically their muscles, they actually expel energy. The stress on your body and your muscles causes you to tire physically and in some cases mentally, and causes you to get sore afterward in response to this stress. For Hyperion though, the stress and chemicals that we release that communicate to us to slow down actually only power him up. So as he gets exhausted, he actually becomes more energized. The fatigue turns into energy in his body because of his unique physiology, meaning that while some other Marvel characters might tire through when they're fighting Hyperion in a battle, Hyperion would be more than ready for the next round, despite clearly having just exerted himself. Number 4. Immune to extreme temperatures. While if you put most of us below freezing or above boiling temperatures, we'd simply get super messed up and eventually die, for Hyperion, this is not a risk. The version of the character that hails from Earth 13034 is actually so durable that he can resist the effects of extreme temperatures, meaning that freezing him or setting him ablaze will basically have no effect on the hero, at least when it comes to the temperature. He can apparently survive temperatures lower than -200 degrees Celsius and higher than 6,000 degrees Celsius. I can't even imagine spending a full day outside when it's higher than like 45 degrees Celsius, so I can't imagine how he doesn't just simply turn into a literal human puddle of goo in plus 6,000, but apparently he would still be solid, even in that super extreme heat. Number 3. Cosmic energy powered healing factor. I would expect someone like Hyperion to have a healing factor, but what I wouldn't have guessed is exactly how said healing factor works. For Hyperion, he he is actually able to manipulate cosmic energy, and it is through this manipulation that he heals himself. His healing factor is so intense that it protects him at all times from disease, infections, and even erases the effects of aging, keeping him eternally young. However, it is also reliant on his cosmic energy stores, which is also what he uses when activating his atomic vision. So while you might have known that Hyperion has a healing factor, you may not have understood that overusing his atomic vision, which depletes his cosmic energy stores, results in Hyperion being unable to heal himself. However, as long as he can survive whatever injury was done to him, he can always replenish his stores to heal later, so it's a temporary thing. Using his atomic vision actually also does damage to his eyes, meaning that he actually has to use the cosmic energy to do both if he wants to be able to see after using his atomic vision powers. Number 2. Microscopic radiation vision. Hyperion can also see things that most humans cannot, such as microscopic traces of radiation on the human body. At one point, he is asked about a dead body and is able to identify that it is not from the same world as the one he occupies. He can tell this just from looking at the body that the solar radiation it has absorbed is basically not the same, thereby discerning that the being is from another world entirely. He shares this information with S.H.I.E.L.D. director at the time, Maria Hill, but believes that is something that she already knew about and wonders what else she knows that she might be keeping from him. So Hyperion isn't just a heavy hitter, he's also quite intelligent and has enhanced senses that only add to his knowledge and perspective of the world around him and those that inhabit it. Not someone you want to mess with, guys. Not someone you want to mess with. Number 1. Held off an incursion. If you are not familiar with the incursions, they are basically when various worlds started to come together, colliding. As a result, many Earths, their heroes, and their villains died, with those universes obliterating one another in the collision. When the incursions came for Hyperion's world, he decided to put himself in between the collision to stop it, and for a moment he actually succeeded, holding the two universes apart, using just his own strength. However, he couldn't hold this forever, and eventually the worlds would collide, but even then, Hyperion would remain! This was a feat accomplished by the Hyperion of Earth 13034. I still can't believe that he survived that. That's crazy.
Number 10. Thermokinesis. Considering his name is Iceman, everyone knows that Bobby Drake has cryokinesis, aka the ability to generate, manipulate, and fully control ice and snow. But this goes hand in hand with his thermokinesis as well. This is the ability to lower both his external and internal body temperature, which projects intense coldness from his body. Like the rest of us humies, the nerve centers for regulating Iceman's body temperature are found in the part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Unlike us though, Iceman can mentally override his hypothalamus to allow his body temperature to be lowered. This ability converts the latent thermal energies in and around his body into an unknown form of energy that is then dissipated. Now this would potentially hurt a human, but a related mutation has also rendered his body tissues unaffected by sub-zero temperatures, thankfully and luckily. Iceman can consciously immediately lower his body temperature from its normal 98 degrees Fahrenheit to absolute zero and lower within the span of a few tenths of a second. Number 9. Icy cover. As Iceman's body temperature drastically falls, the surrounding moisture in the air that is in contact with him also begins to lower in temperature. In a similar but much more extreme way that condensed moisture forms frost, the moisture surrounding Iceman forms an icy covering which encompasses his entire body and obscures his face. When Iceman first began doing this and appeared in the early X-Men comics, this ability essentially made our mutant look like a snowman. He was covered head to toe in snow. But as Bobby learned to increase the severity of his coldness, the consistency of this frozen moisture became crystalline ice. This ice constantly cracks with any movement of his body and immediately reforms, allowing Bobby to move, but with a cracking ice sound every time. Through practice, Iceman has learned to control the intensity of his coldness, and he can selectively lower the temperature of isolated parts of his body to cause this icy shielding in specific areas. Number 8. Organic ice form. But Bobby doesn't only cover himself in ice, he can also completely become ice. ice. Hilariously and kind of redundantly, it's called organic ice. I don't even know if that makes sense. Though the appearance can be similar to when he covers himself in ice, in this form, Iceman is now virtually indestructible, or rather, he is basically unkillable, able to reform himself from being shattered or evaporated, and he is completely translucent in his ice form as well. He has even been incinerated while in human form and was able to rebuild himself in ice. In his ice form, he is able to use the moisture in the air to form spikes, shields, and attach other extra appendages to his body, which he can use in combat. Number 7. Ice Golems. Unsurprisingly, Iceman has the ability to create structures out of ice. The level of detail is determined by his own imagination, as his mastery over his powers has reached the atomic level. For most of his superhero career, Iceman was not able to make the ice sculptures move of their own accord, but this all changed during the Battle of the Atom event in 2013, when Iceman showed off a new extension of his abilities. It was revealed that Iceman can create basic ice structures that possess a rudimentary intelligence. One of these sculptures actually rebelled against Iceman and joined the Brotherhood, which is just freaking weird. It also makes no sense, but this is a comic, so we just go with it. These constructs have been seeming ice clones of Iceman himself, or they have also been big, hulking behemoths and ice monsters. Some other constructs Bobby has created have been turning raindrops into fists that he used against the Iron Fist, a crystal-like ice focuser able to focus the laser beams of Cyclops, and even an entire ice city with intricate details. Number 6. Ice Zord. Bouncing off those semi-sentient constructs to something a bit more awesome that I think deserves its own whole point. In Wolverine and the X-Men issue 33 to 34, Iceman is part of a group of mutant faculty at Wolverine's Jean Grey School for Higher Learning sent to take on the Hellfire Academy and Cade Kilgore. Cade has been utilizing a handful of sentient living volcano behemoths to defend his academy, and while the heroes have a sentient living island fighting on their side, they only have one. So, what does Iceman do? Iceman creates an absolutely massive ice behemoth that looks like Voltron or like a Power Ranger Zord, with an absolutely massive ice sword, and he takes it into battle, slicing the behemoths apart and yelling "Glacier Fist" as he commands the ice Voltron from inside an ice cockpit. It's absolutely amazing and completely bonkers.
Halfway through into number 5, Amnesia Kisses. This also explains quite a lot. In the 1980 film Superman 2, an intriguing aspect of Superman's powers is revealed. Through his kisses, apparently he has the ability to selectively erase memories from another person's mind. In a memorable scene, Clark Kent, portrayed by Christopher Reeves, uses this power to make Lois Lane forget the events of the entire movie. The connection between kissing and memory manipulation is left unexplained. The film doesn't really delve into the mechanics of the ability because it only uses it once and then no one ever mentions it again, but I'd be convinced that it just kinda helps his mind control thing, because when you're kissing someone, you're in quite a vulnerable place. Nevertheless, the outcome is questionable, and Superman's kisses have the power to alter and remove memories apparently, but it serves a narrative purpose It's used to resolve certain story elements, but like, I don't know. It keeps Clark's identity secret from Lois, but like, what the hell? In it 4, Super Dance. Superman's abilities also extend beyond super strength. He has demonstrated finesse and grace on the dance floor when the situation demands it. In a display of his versatile skills, he utilized his strength and smooth moves to create vibrations, effectively disarming a set of concealed bombs. Remarkably, he accomplished this feat without attracting attention or compromising his secret identity, which is why he was doing the dance, because he didn't want to reveal that he was Superman, but still, it's an unexpected combination of power and dancing that actually kind of showcases Superman's adaptability and resourcefulness. Like, he was harnessing his strength and translating it into dance moves, and used that to generate the necessary vibrations to neutralize hidden bombs. Like, it allows him to maintain his cover, and he handled the dangerous situation discreetly. But God, that's... Getting close to the end, into number 3, Symbol Toss. Superman 2, yet again one of the standout Superman films, does introduce some peculiar scenes. Like I said before, you know, the whole kissing thing. But in this movie, General Zod and his cohorts, Non and Ursa, attempt to conquer the world, leading to an intense battle in Fortress of Solitude. During the confrontation though, Superman surprises everyone by tearing the emblem off his suit and hurling it at Non, naring the Kryptonian in like a cellophane trap. The fact that you're able to use the symbol in such a manner is just one of the most surreal and possibly even debated moments in Superman lore, especially because he throws it, but like in that scene the symbol is still on his chest. The mechanics of it remain ambiguous, and that's probably for the best, but I don't know. It looks like it's made out of plastic, but also it's freaking cling film, and then it gains strength enough to detain Non, and then it just vanishes when he's done with it. I don't know where they were going with that one, but hey, if it works, it works. But ultimately, into number 2, Magic Glasses. In a peculiar turn of events depicted in 1978's Superman number 330, it's revealed that Superman's Kryptonian biology, when combined with the glass of his eyeglasses, possesses the uncanny ability to hypnotize individuals, making them perceive Clark Kent as an entirely different person, distinct from the Man of Steel. That's why he doesn't need to change his whole face. This unique power could also be referred to as like secret identity vision. However, as this storyline involving the magic glasses and their hypnotic effects didn't really gain much traction, because I mean the explanation was kind of unnecessary and didn't really make sense. It quickly faded into obscurity because of that, being rarely mentioned or revisited. And then to further distance it, the Crisis on Infinite Earths Absolute Edition provided a comprehensive overview of the multiverse, explicitly designating this story as taking place on an alternate Earth. But it was still a thing. It was still a thing in the main canon for a while, and explains why he didn't need to change his face. And finally, into number 1, Caller ID. Superman once possessed an ability that can only be described as both a secret and utterly useless. Through use of his telepathic powers, the Man of Steel showcased the capacity to identify callers on the other end of a telephone line. In today's world where caller ID is a standard feature, this power is completely obsolete. It's like akin a slingshot to kill Darkseid. It held some relevance during that time because technology was less advanced. There was no caller ID, and telepathic feats actually seemed like it made sense, but as the world progressed and communication tech evolved, didn't really need it anymore.
Number 10, control over life and death. Obviously, as the Phoenix or even the Dark Phoenix, Jean has been shown to have this ability. But did you know that this power actually first manifested when Jean's powers did, really going on to showcase the potential of her future abilities. When Jean's best friend Annie died when she was little after being tragically hit by a car, the traumatic experience caused Jean's powers to manifest. She reached out and created a psychic link between her and her friend, and despite being very new to these abilities, Jean was actually able to hold her friend's mind there, keeping her alive and trying to protect her from the encroaching darkness. Unfortunately, she was not strong or skilled enough just yet to do so for more than a few moments, and ultimately could not bring her friend back to life as Annie's injuries were simply too great. Eventually, Annie's mind disappeared, dying while their minds were linked, leaving Jean alone in the darkness. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when I get to talk about Jean Grey, I know I do, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. And if you are, thank you. Number 9, a god's mind. Sure, the progenitor at this point is not your standard celestial. It was actually created by the Eternals and the Avengers, chiefly with major help from the mutant Mr. Sinister and the main Avenger Tony Stark. The progenitor was revived and reprogrammed, given new morals that were dictated by Earth's heroes in the hopes that it would help the Eternals in ending the war between Druig, who was then ruler of the Eternals, Eternal Prime if you will, and the mutants, who he had classified as deviants. However, this plan backfired when the Celestial decided to blame the inhabitants of Earth for the state of the planet, and put the entire populace basically on trial. In an attempt to save the world, Jean and a covert team infiltrated the progenitor, moving around inside it in the hopes of reaching its kill switch, so they could basically turn it off. Without Jean though, they never would have even made it very far. At the end, Jean was also crucial to the team's efforts, holding psychic damage that would have easily crushed them at bay, and breaking into the Celestial's mind. No small feat considering Celestials are giant cosmic gods. And yes, I know this one was one that was still made by the people of Earth sort of, but still. the wiring's all still there, you know what I mean? Number 8, telepathy. While this one might seem obvious to most readers in the present day, it's important to note that Jean's powerful telepathic skills were actually for many years a secret to both readers and actually to Jean herself. Initially, when we're introduced to Jean in X-Men issue number 1, it is her telekinetic abilities that are put on display. She like picks up a book and like flips through it. And I gotta admit, initially Jean's powers actually seem like the best of the bunch, with the most potential in terms of power levels. And yes, I know this is not how Jean's powers would be depicted, but I'm just saying in that first issue when I was introduced to Jean, I thought she was super cool. However, this feeling of her being super powerful that I had would be very short-lived, as Jean would be shown to struggle with even lifting her own weight telekinetically. In fact, at one point, I think it's even mentioned that Jean's own physical weight is her max limit for what she can lift with her mind. Apparently, what one can lift with one's own body is weirdly relevant, or used to be anyways, when it came to what a superhero could lift with their mind. Jean's like, I can't lift that much. They were like, you can't lift that much with your mind either, girl. Evidently, we didn't want to let Jean be too powerful. Otherwise, who would act as the team's damsel in distress? Which was the role Jean quickly became relegated to filling, honestly. However, later on, not only would her telekinetic powers become stronger as a result of both training and her bond to the Phoenix Force, but we'd also learned that this wasn't even Jean's major ability. No. As a psionic, Jean actually became known for being more powerful as a telepath, an ability that was hidden away from her for most of her life in an attempt to protect her from her own inexperience and her power's instability, thanks to mental blocks that were put in place by, you guessed it, Charles Xavier, who first met Jean when she was very young and her powers had just begun to manifest. Charles, of course, would eventually remove these blocks later in Jean's life when he felt that Jean was better equipped to handle these extraordinarily powerful abilities. And maybe when he was like, you know what, I should probably, the cat's out of the bag, I gotta let people know Jean's actually super OP. I think he didn't want Jean to harsh his mellow, to be honest. Number 7, empathy. One of the most overlooked powers that I think Jean and some others possess is the power of empathy. Empathy basically means that you feel what others feel. When someone says to you, I empathize, it's different than saying I sympathize, because they aren't just, imagining what you're going through and trying to understand it. They actually feel what you feel, likely having shared an experience with you or an emotional response at the very least. In comic book terms, being empathic, it doesn't usually just mean feeling what others feel. It can also mean controlling others' emotions, or using the emotions of people around you to make other people feel differently. A power that Jean has demonstrated before, like when she used her empathic skills to defeat Xavier's evil twin, Cassandra Nova. And she's actually used this ability to defeat a lot of people, I'm gonna be honest. But I don't think people think about the empathy, and it's pretty crazy, man. Number 6, finding the weakness. I mean, as a telepath, of course Jean can scan your mind and take with her any information that she finds. And this, of course, includes, you guessed it, any weaknesses that you have. Especially if you fall into the trap of thinking about said weaknesses while Jean is in your mind. If you have a nut allergy, watch out if Jean Grey's around you if you're fighting her. But even if you don't think about your weaknesses, Jean could probably easily find this out. That is exactly what she managed to do, although it wasn't quite as easy to know when she got inside his head. And you'd think telepathically he'd be pretty gifted himself, being the creator and leader of a hive mind as the Clintar and symbiote King in Black. But even Null could not resist Jean's power. Although she did have to try really hard, admittedly.
Halfway through into number 5, wisdom. Logan's journey as a superhero spans across significant historical events. He served in both World War I and World War II. He even fought alongside Captain America. And following these wars, he found himself in Japan, where he formed a family only to tragically lose them. And these devastating losses, combined with centuries of heartbreak, contribute to Logan's bitter and cynical demeanor. But after going through the Adamantium bonding process, he befriended Alpha Fight, a Canadian superhero team, and became one of Canada's earliest superheroes. His initial task involved intervening in a conflict between Hulk and a Wendigo. However, his path took a turn when he was sent to eliminate Charles Xavier, but ended up being influenced by Xavier's telepathic abilities, leading him to join the X-Men. But still, Wolverine's wealth of experiences and wisdom greatly influenced the X-Men's journey, and I mean, with an extended lifespan comes years to learn and become wiser, which which he clearly has, and then it only continues on. So yeah, dude, damn, well done. Good for you. In at 4, feral form. The 90s marked a peculiar era in comic books characterized by excessive violence, extreme physical attributes, and objectification. But it was a time when unconventional ideas emerged, yielding both remarkable stories like Age of Apocalypse and disappointing ones like the Clone Saga. But surprisingly, Wolverine spent a significant portion of this decade without his adamantium skeleton. Despite losing the metal coating, he did retain his bone claws and healing factor, maintaining, like, you know, the classic Wolverine sort of aspect. However, the supervillain Genesis sought to actually restore Wolverine's adamantium, driven by a desire to serve the powerful Apocalypse. In a failed attempt though, Logan's body rejected the procedure and triggered a dormant mutation. Stripped of adamantium, Wolverine underwent a primal transformation, adopting an animalistic mentality while his nails grew into natural claws. It showcased the profound impact that the absence of adamantium had on Wolverine's body, and he just kind of became a beast, ironically enough. So yeah, he kind of needs the adamantium nowadays, otherwise it kind of goes back. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Super Dad. On Earth 982, Rena was the new girl at high school, where some of the more popular girls tried to make her life miserable, stating that she was the daughter of an immigrant and an unemployed biker and all that. But when her dad, Logan, picked her up from school on his bike, everyone's opinion changed, especially when they learned that her mother, Elektra, was a wealthy martial arts expert. Yeah, it's crazy what fear can do. However, life at high school wasn't just about dealing with, like, the crowd and, you know, normal high school things, because, you know, it's a comic book high school. So, as Wild Thing, Rena had to save a classmate from a high-speed kidnapper, defeat a computerized assassin, stop a demonic invader, and even fight one of her teachers when he was turned into a Prime Sentinel. But that's just high school. But the fact that he can just pull up to her school and then everyone stops making fun of his kid, that's a superpower, okay? And I wish my dad had that superpower. Although I probably wouldn't be as funny as I think I am if that had been the case. But ultimately, in number 2, time travel. When translating comic book superheroes to the big screen, screenwriters have to take creative liberties to adapt the material effectively, okay? What happens in comics can't necessarily work on screen. For example, Thanos' infatuation with Lady Death, which was a significant aspect of his character in the comics, was omitted for Infinity War and Endgame, allowing for a more focused portrayal of him. Similarly, the X-Men's colorful costumes were deemed impractical for the early films, leading to more black latex that ironically have aged poorly compared to their comic counterparts. But when the classic Days of Future Past storyline was adapted in the movie of the same name, significant alterations were made. In the comics, Kitty Pryde was the central character sent to the past to save the future, but in the movie, Wolverine took on that role. The film introduced the concept of Kitty Pryde's ability to send someone's consciousness back in time, with the caveat that it damages the mind. Due to his regenerative healing factor though, Wolverine became the only valid candidate to actually go through time that far back and ensure everyone's survival. And then finally, in at number 1, the Phoenix Force. I mean, like, okay, this is kind of a cop-out, but like, it still happened, okay? It was originally believed that the Phoenix Force was just simply an alternate personality of Jean Grey, or well, I guess the Phoenix was, just emerging when she acquired immense power. However, after Jean's tragic demise in the Dark Phoenix saga, it was retconned that the Phoenix was in fact a cosmic entity, and the Phoenix Force had a knack for possessing individuals, with Jean Grey being its favored host. Over the years though, it has possessed numerous mutants. Rachel Grey, Jean's daughter from an alternate future, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magic, and Namor were all possessed by the Phoenix Force at some point, and simultaneously, in fact, forming the group known as the Phoenix Five, because, you know, you couldn't have one more, otherwise they would be competing with the Sinister Six, and you couldn't have one less, otherwise it would be like the Fantastic Four. You know, there's a lot of numbers that you gotta work with. But yeah, Wolverine has also had it, okay? So there you go. He's had that, and he has all those powers, or at least he has. And you know what, if you want to get mad at me for including this, that's fine.
Number 10, faster than lightning. I knew Hyperion was fast, but I did not know he was that fast. Honestly, kind of the same with his strength. It's interesting to learn he's an Eternal, because Eternals I always think of being somewhat limited in terms of their physical abilities, even though they are extremely powerful. Hyperion as an alien Eternal though might be even more powerful all around. In addition to the super strength you've likely marveled at before on the page, Hyperion is also extremely fast and has been shown to move faster even than light itself, if we are talking the Earth 13034 version of the character, which is also considered one of the main versions. We'll get into that in a minute. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us and that you love Hyperion by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Eternal Physiology. Seriously, I just learned this one, even though it seems oddly intrinsic to this character. I don't know how I missed it. I thought Hyperion was just a powerful alien from another world like DC Superman, being one of the Marvel equivalent characters. And he is, but he's also, in a very Marvel way, an Eternal. A powerful Eternal alien. So I had to share that with you in case, like me, you also did not know this and you just thought he was an alien from another world. The important thing to know with Hyperion is there are many different versions of him, since he himself is not even inherently an Earth 616 main continuity character. And when it comes to which Hyperion is considered the mainstay, that has actually kind of changed over time. For this point though, we're talking about Hyperion of Earth 712, who first appeared in Avengers 85 back in 1971. The first Hyperion to appear, I believe, in the comics. And when it comes to this version of the character, he is actually considered to be an Eternal. In fact, I think all versions of him are still considered to be Eternal, but still somehow I missed that origin. This is how Hyperion is able to channel energy, which ultimately charges his powers. To be clear, this version of Eternal Physiology does not translate to robots like we learned in the MCU, which is also based off of a revelation of what the Eternals are in the comics as well, at least the Earth-based Eternals. However, at this time they were just prehistoric humans initially who were experimented on by the Celestials when they visited Earth more than a millennia ago, and the Celestials also went out to other planets, did this in other places, so there are other Eternals. Hence why Thanos is also kind of connected to the Eternals, he's also one. But from Titan. Number 8. Invulnerable in every sense. Okay, so I knew Hyperion was invulnerable, but what I didn't fully comprehend is just what high level of invulnerability he possesses. If we're talking about Earth 712 Hyperion, the first version of the character to appear, we have seen him completely unharmed by impossibly strong weapons and metals such as Ultimate Wolverine of Earth 1610's adamantium claws. Wolverine's claws are typically known for being able to cut through most things, but apparently Hyperion is not one of those things, or beings rather, that he can harm with his famous weapons. Aside from that, this version of Hyperion has also withstood direct blows from Thor's famous Uru hammer, Mjolnir. Withstanding the blow of Thor's hammer is no easy feat, and even some of the most resilient heroes and villains from Marvel crumble under the weight of its blows. So, pretty impressive. Number 7. Doesn't need to breathe. We don't know this one for sure when it comes to certain versions of this character, but what we do know about Earth 712 Marcus Milton, aka Hyperion, is that he can travel in space without any assistance. He doesn't need a special suit, and it doesn't seem to be through the specific use of a power that he can protect himself from the cold vacuum of space. Some believe he can survive flying around in space where there is no oxygen because, well, he doesn't actually need to breathe. On top of this, we know that Hyperion can continue to fight for days on end without tiring, only growing tired after multiple days of relentless and unyielding battle, where he has to operate at his peak levels of power. While not confirmed for Earth 712's Hyperion, the version of Earth 13034 has confirmed that he doesn't depend on oxygen to survive, which likely means that his 712 counterpart doesn't need to breathe either. Number 6. Powered by the sun. Something else that I find fascinating about Hyperion, and that I didn't personally know, is that he is literally solar powered. He can actually absorb solar energy and use this to give himself energy, which is how he can fight for so long in battle. He basically takes in the solar energy and converts it to usable energy in his body. If his solar energy stores are full, once he depletes energy accrued through other more typical means for us humans, he can use the solar photons to keep himself going, converting those into energy which he then uses to power himself. I guess this shouldn't surprise me, considering he is, like I said earlier, basically one of Marvel's versions of DC Superman, but I didn't know that he was that close to an adaptation, even sharing Clark's sort of solar-based abilities in some regards. It's a little different, but still similar.
And at 5, super speed. Spider-Man's agility and acrobatics are often associated with his spider sense and spider qualities, but there's another superpower that often goes unnoticed: incredible speed. Okay, while swinging between buildings, Spider-Man can cover 2 miles in a mere 5 seconds. And it's not just like his web slinging that propels him. His speed allows him to also avoid attacks and dodge bullets. Okay, if you can dodge bullets, you're freaking fast. Spider-Man's exceptional speed was showcased extremely well during the Civil War storyline when he attacked Luke Cage's mansion prior to switching sides. He bursted into the mansion, faced off a room filled with SWAT team officers, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye, but he moved so swiftly that he appeared as a blur, taking down multiple opponents without being detected. Okay, this often overlooked power grants Spider-Man an incredible advantage in combat, and explains quite a lot. I mean, he won't be beating Quicksilver or Flash in any races, but dude's still fast as hell. Okay, if you look like a blur, then yeah, you're fast. And at 4, talking to spiders. God, thank God they don't talk about this one anymore, because spiders. The power to control and summon spiders may initially appear better suited for like a horror comic, but it actually happens to be one of Spider-Man's lesser known abilities. He chooses not to emphasize the terrifying aspect of this power, thank the Lord. Instead, he uses it in more of like a collective strength sense, tapping into the power of many rather than just aiming to haunt his opponents with lifelong nightmares. Thank you, Peter. This skill likely was introduced into the comics because people were like watching Ant-Man a little too much, you know, because he can like control ants, and now even Squirrel Girl can command squirrels. So it just seems like if you have a connection to an animal, you should be able to control them, apparently. So yeah, Spider-Man had that sort of connection established with arachnids. In truth, it feels more aligned with like Venom or Carnage, but I mean, the only reason that Venom has spider powers is because he bonded to Peter in the first place, so I understand why that wouldn't happen. But like, yeah, okay, they're twisted villains who would fully exploit this ability, but thank God Venom doesn't have it. Yeah, interestingly enough though, it's not the mainstream Spider-Man who possesses this ability, but rather Kane Parker, but I'm sure Spider-Man could do it too. If he can do the acid hands and he had the claws, I'm sure he could do this, but thank God he doesn't. Getting close to the end in number 3, regeneration. While webbing is handy for transportation and apprehending criminals and sometimes even just making a mess if you want to, Peter's mind actually lets him use this ability in unconventional and actually kind of genius ways, specifically turning it back on himself. This gave rise to the concept of a web cocoon, an audacious idea that bears resemblance to how Peter immobilizes criminals with webbing until the authorities arrive, because you know he wraps them up. But the only difference is that when Peter does the web cocoon on himself, he uses it as a tool for hibernation and accelerated healing. Peter has only used this extremely insane skill on one occasion, but it was because he sustained near fatal injuries during a battle. So he encased himself in a cocoon of webbing to induce rapid healing. It's so insanely cool and a tremendously valuable ability for Spider-Man, but it appears to be exclusive to Peter himself and doesn't really extend to others, and again, he hasn't used it again since. The primary reason behind the limitation was, well, I mean, he's in hibernation when this is happening. You can't really produce Spider-Man comics when Peter's not Spider-Man. But also, while he's in there, he sheds the damaged skin and basically regenerates a whole new body, which is gonna make us all wonder the same thing that WandaVision did. Ship of Theseus? Is it the same Peter, or is it a new Peter if he regenerated basically everything? There you go, debate it in the comments. You're welcome. Engagement. But ultimately, in number 2, radiation resistance. Now, while some spider-related abilities are well known within Spider-Man's world, you know, wall crawling, proportional strength, knowing the formula to make webs, spider sense, one of them is actually lesser known, but in reality makes a lot of sense. Spider-Man has demonstrated a resistance to poisons and harmful chemicals on multiple occasions, and while not a pivotal power, it does serve a purpose. Essentially, if a villain attempts to poison Peter Parker, their efforts would just be in vain. Moreover, if Mary Jane were to betray Peter and attempt to slip something into his coffee, he would remain oblivious. His resistance to basic poisons could potentially be exploited if someone like knew this and like tried to use it against him, so it's often overlooked, but yeah, it adds another layer of protection for Peter that reflects just like the fact that he is in essence just a Spider-Man. And given that his powers were given to him by a radio radioactive spider, the resistance extends to radiation as well. So yeah, that's right. If Green Goblin ever goes to Chernobyl, Spidey can still stop him. And finally, in at number 1, Spider-Mobile. Hell yes. I love how ridiculous this is. Corona Motors, aiming to promote their environmentally friendly car engine, enlisted the services of advertising firm Carter and Lombardo to propose the idea of a Spider-Mobile in Spider-Man comics. Initially dismissing it as foolish, Spider-Man reconsidered when he realized the dire need for money to cover his rent and expenses. So with the assistance of the Human Torch, they successfully constructed the Spider-Mobile in the comics. After a crash course in driving, Spider-Man's first encounter with the vehicle led him to capture one of Hammerhead's henchmen. However, Mysterio ends up getting Spider-Man to dump the car in a river, prompting Corona Motors to demand its return, despite the inability to locate it in the water. Spider-Man faced a modified version of the Spider-Mobile, engineered by the Tinkerer later on, engaging in a fierce battle with it. Spider-Man eventually subdued it and returned the damaged imitation Spider-Mobile to Carter and Lombardo, but yeah, that's a thing that happened in the comics. Yeah, there you go. In a 10, shape-shifting face. Superman possesses an incredible level of control over all of his muscles, which at one point allowed him to alter the shape of his face and even transform his entire body. The remarkable ability is showcased in Action Comics number 55 and several other Golden Age stories, but in his early adventures, Superman used this power to assume various disguises, such as mimicking disgraced athletes or adopting the appearance of extraterrestrial creatures. Given the extent of the shape-shifting ability though, it raises the question, why would he choose to conceal his identity with glasses when he's able to transform his entire being? But the answer to that question is complicated. While Superman's shape-shifting ability grants him remarkable disguise potential, he primarily relies on Clark Kent to protect the identity. But the real reason behind how this is so effective will be explained in a minute. And at 9, explosion containment. In the Flashpoint paradox, Superman joins forces with the Flash and other heroes to rescue him from Professor Zoom and Rogues. As Zoom threatens to destroy Central City with powerful bombs attached to Flash and the other rogues, the heroes come up with a plan. They split up, each taking a rogue and moving to defuse the bombs at a safe distance. Superman takes on Heatwave and positions him at a cliff. With his superhuman strength, Superman just grabs the bomb and covers it with his bare hands, and then contains the explosion. The rest of Team Flash defuses the bomb successfully and saves Flash, but Superman's just like, I got this, don't worry, boom! It's impressive, but I mean, yeah, it would make sense, but also the fact that, you had to hold your hands together hella hard for that to not leak out the sides, that's impressive. That's a power in and of itself. In a Master Builder, this is where it starts getting weird. In the 1987 film Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, there is a scene where Nuclear Man damages the Great Wall of China. Upon witnessing the destruction, Superman merely gazes at the debris, and within moments, the wall is miraculously restored. This power is often overlooked, but yeah, Superman is able to repair objects or structures just by looking at them, like a master builder from the Lego movie. The reason why this is actually a thing is not really understood. It's very, very specific, so it's literally never mentioned again. Because I mean, also, the Great Wall of China is not really part of Superman's daily patrol. While he protects the world from imminent threats, he can also cut the union workers' time in half. So there you go. Maybe that's something to look out for, government. The unique power of just rebuilding objects through looking at them is just so dumb. But again, it would have been useful in the Lego Batman movie. Bruce could have used your help there, Soups. Also, it just clicked that the Lego movie is canon in the Spider-Verse now, which means that we have yet another link between Marvel and DC. In at 7, mind control. In a daring series of events, in Superman number 45 from 1947, the alien race known as the Collectors unleashes their power of invisibility to disrupt a boxing match and abduct Biff the Unbeatable. Their audacity continues as they capture atomic scientist John Henders during a crucial presentation, followed by the abduction of a beauty contest participant and judge, Lois Lane, and then finally, millionaire Herkimer Ingot falls victim to their grasp within the confines of his own damn home. Superman ends up getting captured, or lets himself get captured, because during his imprisonment, he uses his telepathic abilities to coerce his captors into revealing the device that grants them interdimensional interdimensional travel. He then uses this to break free from his cell, turns himself into a collector. So with the aid of that dimension hopping device, Superman transports himself to the third dimension. He then also destroys the machine, ensuring the collector's abduction thing comes to an end. And it's 6, self-cloning. In the pages of 1958 Superman number 125, an unusual encounter with an alien ship leads to the loss of Superman's usual powers. Instead, he discovers two peculiar abilities: the power to emit rainbow beams from his fingertips, and the ability to create a miniature version of himself from the palm of his hand. While the rainbow beams had their limitations, Superman relied heavily on his little clones to perform tasks requiring his usual strength. It comes as no surprise that Superman does eventually get his powers back. Superman found little reason after that to really use the rainbow beams and his mini-me. It's reasonable to assume that he could also keep these powers. Why would you rely on those when you can use frickin' heat vision? The fact that they only really showed up once does like limit their use, their functionality, and the fact that no one frickin' remembers it.
Number 5, healing. In the comics, there was a time when Aquaman lost his left hand, and funnily enough, this actually managed to make him even cooler and or stronger in a few different ways. To make up for his lost appendage, he got himself a wide variety of alternate hands, each with different benefits. He has had a cybernetic hand with a retractable hook, as well as a hand made out of liquid metal. But I think his most notable hand was a special one made out of water, courtesy of the Lady of the Lake, called the Water Bearer's Hand. This hand was what allowed Aquaman to create freezing or scalding jets of water from his hands and dehydrate fools, but it has even more nifty benefits beyond that. Thanks to his magical water hand, Aquaman has received the ability to completely heal others with its magical properties. But then, there's also that nifty life force connection. This has allowed Aquaman to even restore fallen gods into their divine forms and retrieve the essences of dead gods, meaning Aquaman has not only resurrection abilities, but also resurrection that extends to godly entities themselves. Number 4, portals. Let's jump back to that magic hand here for a second. The Water Bearer hand bestowed on Aquaman numerous magical abilities. Now we've talked about a bunch, but the hand seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. Another attribute it granted to Aquaman was the ability to open interdimensional portals. Obviously, as we've proven so far, Aquaman is no slouch, but he isn't really that helpful when it comes to extraterrestrial threats that require him to venture out of this world. For that, he would traditionally need the help of his other League members, but with the Water Bearer hand's magic, that was no longer the case. Now he could travel great distances across the world in an instant and even out into the wider universe or even other dimensions. Needless to say, the Lady of the Lake really lent Aquaman a hand with this gift. Pun intended. Number 3, flight. This power has actually been a hotly contested point among fans of Aquaman for a long time. A lot of people believe that Aquaman cannot fly, and they are actually partially right. Honestly, there isn't really a need for him to fly. Being an aquatic character, it seems almost pointless, and there is also the question of how he would even be able to break gravity like that. Although you could ask that of any flying character, honestly. I think the confusion really comes from the fact that Aquaman does often perform super jumping to get around. I'm talking he jumps miles in single bounds, similar to the Hulk. That is easy to mistake for actual flying, and for a long time that was the extent of his airborne abilities. But luckily for Aquaman, he has a pretty good relationship with the god of the sea, Poseidon, and thanks to that Olympian's blessing, Aquaman gained the actual ability to fly in the Prime Earth post-Flashpoint DC universe. Unsurprisingly though, he still doesn't really use it that much. Number 2, Water Wraith. JLA The Obsidian Age was a story from 2003 which, among other things, involved Aquaman and Atlantis being sent 3,000 years back in time, where they were ultimately put under the thumb of the League of Ancients. As we would almost all expect, the Justice League discovered the disappearance and they go to the rescue, traveling back in time to save their comrade and his people. When they arrive, they learn that the sorceress Gamamemini, whose name I likely savagely butchered just now, had trapped Aquaman's consciousness in a pool of water. Now after freeing the rest of the Atlanteans, the Justice League launched their final assault on this sorceress to no avail as she reappeared in the future. Now, in the future, or I guess the present, she attempted to take control of the world by causing a global drought. Now, in order to stop her, Zatanna channeled Aquaman's consciousness into the oceans. This means Aquaman, with this upgrade, literally became a living body of water, and he used this awesome water wraith power to defeat Gemimemene once and for all. But this isn't the only time he's taken on a form composed entirely of H2O. And finally, in at number 1, super strength. Super strength is one of those things that most superheroes are just kind of expected to have. But not all super strength is equal, and characters have varying degrees of it. I think a lot of people who are familiar with the character of Aquaman but aren't his close fans may underestimate his strength. Again, we know Aquaman is often the butt of a lot of jokes related to his usefulness, but this guy is no slouch, not by a long shot. Aquaman is strong. He is more than strong enough to send Superman and Wonder Woman several dozen feet away with singular blows, which is nothing to scoff at. He has been capable of lifting a 160,000 ton sea liner barehanded and lifting and throwing a sunken cargo ship. But even more impressive than that is when he literally pushed an entire tectonic plate over the entrance to the trench's lair while underwater. Aquaman's strength is something that is often overlooked, kind of like how the character himself is overlooked much too often.